I want to thank Laurel Chor for coming in and presenting with us. And I thank our sponsors, which are Photo Shelter, American Photo, Epson, Archive Magazine, and Pro Photo Daily. We're thrilled to have her, and she's on a little bit of a hiatus from Ukraine. She'll be going back in a couple of weeks, but she's going to tell us all about that. So, Laurel, it is all yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining tonight. I'm really excited about presenting. Thank you, Frank, organizing, Jay, for taking care of everything. Today, it'll be very casual. I have prepared a very lazy, wide edit that's sort of kind of a chronological visual diary of what I've been covering in Ukraine since my first visit in early March. I've been going in and out since then. I just came back in late November, so I've been gone a few weeks now, and then I'll be going back in February. I'm a freelancer. I work with I do a bit of everything. Photography is my preferred medium. That's what I do, but I'm also filming a documentary. It'll be a long-term documentary following 3 civilians, primarily in Donbass, over the course of the war. At the beginning, on one of my first trips, me and a couple of colleagues, we also made a short documentary and a podcast. I'll be giving you a taste of that too. So I kind of work primarily visually, but sometimes throw in other things, and I'll be sharing a bit of everything today. So I'll start by sharing my screen if Photo Mechanic is willing to cooperate right now. Let's see. Okay. Oops. That work?
Yes, but we see your grid.
Oh, you do?
Yes. Maybe there's a percentage view.
Because I see my full screen. Giving you a bit of a teaser then.
Maybe Jay.
Laurel, try to start if you could just try to start the slideshow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's in Photo Mechanic.
Oh, so maybe arrangement?
Yeah. Arrangement. You make arrangement. Nope. How about that? You still see a grid?
Grid.
Or maybe if I just share my screen instead of Photo Mechanic, let me try that.
Yeah, Jay, somebody is impersonating me, I think, in the chat room.
Okay, let's see if this works. Now Photo Mechanic is giving me the spinning volleyball. Okay, is that still a grid?
Now you have the grid just on the side.
Now you're good.
Okay, great. And I'm gonna do. Okay, thanks, guys. So this is the Lviv train station. As a freelancer, it was my first time covering a war. And me and a couple of friends, we were both sort of at a point in our career when we had the time and the resources and the experience to sort of go in. And I'm living in England. My colleague, he's Bosnian origin, so this sort of hit home for him, and we decided to sort of just go for it. And I think as journalists, you all understand, we wanted to go and sort of see what we could do. So we started off on the border. We were doing, refugee stories, and gradually we made it into Lviv. Lviv was a very different time. We actually stayed at a university, and we got a very intimate look at what it was like for people there at the time. So there we go. And I think it was really interesting for me to be working independently. We sort of getting a lot of dings here. We sort of were very lucky to end up working with a local producer. We sort of became a team. Because we're independent, we could sort of just go with the flow and talk to people and find stories on the ground instead of being assigned a certain story or a certain geographic area. So these next few images, for example, we were staying at this university just in a dorm room, which we got through a friend of a friend. And students at this university were volunteering at a shelter for children, and they brought us there, and we got to meet these kids who were sent alone from the east by their parents, who had to stay behind and work or take care of the apartment. We ended up going to the funeral of the father of one of the university students. She recently graduated. She graduated earlier this year, and her father was a soldier who was on a base in the West, and it was hit quite early on in the war, and dozens of soldiers died. It still remains one of the biggest strikes that happen to this day. This is Tanya. We're still in touch, and she actually ended up asking me to, photograph the funeral for her. So, we found that working on the ground and really spending time in these communities and getting to know people sort of allows us to gain access and tell these stories, I think, in a more personal, intimate way than staffers might be able to, who are sort of a lot more controlled, who don't necessarily have the freedom to go wherever they want, who have to follow very strict security protocols. Obviously, there's benefits to having those kinds of resources, but there's also, I think, downsides. This is from a civilian training center, also early on. This is outside of Lviv as well. And you just have these extraordinary scenes of all these regular people who come from all walks of life, who all of a sudden are signing up to learn how to shoot guns or how to perform first aid on someone who's bleeding out. And those were sort of the remarkable scenes that you'd see early on. For me, as a journalist, I like to, for my focus is really people. It's really their stories. It's really the emotional experience of all these people who are, experiencing war, who didn't expect it, or who were, just living their lives before February 24th. This kid on the right, I actually spoke to him recently. He's in university now in the UK, actually, and he was really sweet. I'll never forget. He had his pet snail with him, which was really sweet. He had hidden in his basement shelter for 2 weeks while his town outside of Kiev was occupied, and he kept his little snail alive the whole time. He's also from the same shelter where everyone's sort of living together.
Laurel, when
Mhm.
when you contact somebody back like that, what's their reaction? Does it take a moment for them to remember who you are? And are they grateful that you called? I mean, what's that feeling like?
I think, this war is so interesting, happening in 2022. It's so online. Ukraine is super digitally connected, very internet savvy, especially the young people, of course. And, these people are following me. I follow them on Instagram, they follow me. So they kind of, keep up to what I'm doing. I sort of see what they're doing. And that's how I mainly keep in touch with most people is through Instagram. So I think it's people are, especially early on in the war. I think, before people were too tired of journalists. I think, I also hope that, the way I interact with people and the way I tell stories, like I do try to spend time with them. I try to get to know them, and it's not just like a fleeting encounter. And also, social media allows you to keep in touch. So usually they're I think they're happy to hear from you. And if they didn't want to talk to journalists anymore, they would just not. So that happens too, which is fine, of course. This was from a train station in Kiev. One of the recurring themes in Ukraine that I really like is animals. People take so good care of their animals. This is a young couple, also still in touch with them. They they had fled Kiev and were coming back to join the territorial defense, and had brought their pet rats with them and were bringing them back. So they were really cute. And things like this, I think, now most people, I think, are taking the train a lot more, but especially in the early weeks and months of the war, staffers generally were driven around, armored vehicles and all that. I was taking the train, and you get to meet people like this and get to know what it's like for people, just normal people getting around the country. And I'm really grateful for experiences like that. This is from a basement of an apartment in Kiev. And the way, again, I work on the ground, we went to the site of a missile strike, and we just started talking to people in the buildings next to us. And we, people actually invited us in. They're like, come, like, see how we live. And they invited us into the basement, and they this woman had just given birth. And Ukrainians, in my experience, have been just so incredibly open, and brave, and dignified, in that they want to tell their stories, and that they understand what you're there to do, and they want you to see how they're living, and they want you to see what they're forced to do now. So I'm going to show you. Let's see. So at the time, this was right before this next picture. This is a portrait of someone we actually interviewed for a podcast series. We were at the beginning, we did a podcast series, we did a short documentary. I'll show you a trailer for the short documentary now. So a lot of the time when I'm shooting photographs, I'm actually recording a podcast or filming a documentary as well. So actually, so I'll show you the trailer for the documentary, and then I'll show you the photographs I was taking at the same time, and you can sort of see the visual similarities and how I'm almost like a set photographer in a way for the documentary we're filming. And it is a challenge doing both, but and I got a mirrorless just so that the sound of my very loud D6 shutter wouldn't bother our DP. But let me stop sharing the screen, and then I'll share. This is the trailer for a documentary. The full video is about 20 minutes long, and that's on YouTube.
We're at the meeting point for 7 or 8 liberated towns around Kiev, towns from which there's been horrifying images of war crimes committed. And this is what people are coming back to.
Тут кругом повалювалося, ну тут бах-бах, бах-бах. А тут така тишина, аж не віриться.
Many residents in these areas haven't been heard from in weeks, completely cut off without power, cell networks, or water.
Кат, смотри, что творится, мама дорогая. 8 этаж, вон, видите? 8. Привет! Да, давайте, родные. Боже, слава Богу.
Ukrainians are fighting to return to the lives they had before the invasion. But the wounds of war run deep.
How did you feel when you heard that Borodyanka had been liberated?
Якщо закрити очі, то якось уявляєш так, як воно все було. Настільки це все знайоме, близьке. Зараз на це все дивитись просто.
Тривогу, тому що якось не хочеться, щоб це все повернулося. Але хотілося вірити, щоб це вже був кінець.
And we'll put that in the chat room, that link. But let me ask you, Laurel, like, when did you realize that I need to shoot video of this? Like, how did that work for you from a creative standpoint?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, to be entirely honest, a lot of the time it's just what's more pitchable, right? Photojournalism is a tough industry, and I do have a video background as well. I was a full-time TV producer for Vice News Tonight on HBO for a couple of years. And my colleague, my friend that I went in, he also worked for Vice in Indonesia full time as a DP. So I think, you know, it was looking at what we could do, the way, you know, looking at the strengths of the team we had. You know, we had a DP, I'm a producer, we had a local producer who could translate, and that was just and we were lucky. We reached out to, well, actually this company, Project Raisin, sort of a media startup that's fairly new, and they reached out, they knew I was on the ground, and asked, you know, is there something we can do? And working as a team, this was really it. And I'm really grateful that Project Raisin sort of, you know, lets me be me in a way. You know, like I also host, I'm on camera correspondent for other companies sometimes, and you know, then of course, like my aim is to be the correspondent, but here they were happy to let me be me, which is a photojournalist, and I could wear my cameras and take photos. Like in some of the podcasts, you actually hear my camera shutter going off. So I was lucky that I could make it work, and for me that was really a revelation in a way. It allowed me to, you know, do all these things I'm interested in at the same time, and there's not many outlets or publications that would let me do that, and that's a big reason why I've stayed freelance, is that I know if in most staffer jobs, I sort of be pegged into one role where I couldn't, you know, explore different mediums or try different ways. So these, you know, these are, like, for example, you know, Armand, the DP, he's filming in the seat in front of me. I'm sitting next to them, and he's shooting, I'm shooting, and I'm able to get these stills at the same time that he's filming. And he also understands that, like, you know, for me as a photojournalist, I need to take photos. So we just work well as a team, and I think it worked out. And you know, that way, you know, we also great to have stills that complement the film. So this scene, you didn't really get a sense of it. I'm not sure if you got a sense of it in the trailer, but we actually saw this couple crossing the Irpin Bridge outside of Kyiv that was destroyed, and we drove past them later, and you know, it was like, we need to stop and talk to them. They had their dog with them. They're just carrying, you know, a couple bags, and they were heading back home for the first time since they fled at the beginning of the war, and we actually gave them a ride back to their apartment. We were gonna, you know, let them walk 3 kilometers when we could just drive them. And, you know, on the way, they're like, you know, can we stop here? We can show you, we wanted to see the graves of our neighbors who were killed while we were gone. And, you know, they showed us that. And we caught this beautiful organic scene where their old neighbors started popping out, and you know, no one had heard from anyone in weeks, and they didn't know they were alive. And we got this beautiful reunion scene at a very bleak time. And these are the types of moments that I always try to capture, these, you know, emotional scenes where I hope the viewer can sort of get a sense of what it feels like for these people. So these are the graves that were just dug basically in the parking lot. So these are, again, like, just having the freedom as freelancers, you know, with the car to sort of roam around. You just catch moments like this, like just a tank, you know, this was while we were filming with that couple. We just turned around and convoy of tanks drove past. And we were in Borodyanka, a town outside of Kyiv that was destroyed. And we were just standing at a traffic circle, and this man comes up to us and he's like, "Hey, are you journalists?" We're like, "Yes." He's like, come with me to my horse farm. Russians came and destroyed it. So this soldier, former and current soldier, he lived in this town, had a horse farm where he had let people ride horses to rehabilitate from mental health issues, from PTSD. And he had previously fought for Azov, and Russians heard and came to his farm and destroyed everything. And, you know, while we were there, I forget if we went back but you know, a vet actually was treating one of the horses who was hit with shrapnel. And so I I tried to report very organically, where it's really just talking to people, spending time, chatting to the person next to you, and I think people also sense that openness and come up to you. At least I hope so. This is from Bucha, the site of the infamous mass grave outside of Kiev that was discovered early on in the war. This is that man from our film at the end. He also, again, we were just walking around Bordyanka and I saw him, he was clearly packing things into a car that he had just scavenged from his apartment. So we started talking to him and he's like, yeah, come see my family's old apartment. And so people are just extraordinarily open and brave and being willing to share their stories with complete strangers, even in such vulnerable moments. And I'll always be very grateful and in awe of that. This is in, I think, Bucha or Irpin, just a few weeks after, the mass graves are uncovered, very quickly was rebuilt. People are coming back. There were girls rollerblading on the street, and seeing those gradual changes is also something I'm glad I have the freedom as a freelancer to sort of see over time, to have spent all that time on the ground. This is in Kharkiv, further east, at a time when Kharkiv was being very, very badly shelled. Kharkiv was very badly shelled for months and months and months. And this is in Saltivka, I believe, which is one of the worst shelled neighborhoods. So they're quite close to the Russian border. And, we sort of were driving around, sort of came across a site that was recently shelled, and we walked up the stairs, and this old woman and her grandson she was in the apartment at the time. And again, people just seem to intuitively understand the importance of having people witness what's happening, even at such a sensitive time. She's still in shock. Her grandson is trying to reassure her. So this is a story that was also recorded for the podcast. This is them, literally had just got there. We're putting a tarp over the shattered window, and they didn't mind that I was just there in the corner photographing, and I'm also still in touch with them. This is a volunteer group evacuating a lady who has multiple sclerosis. She is happily in Germany now, I'm happy to say. And I met this kid in the baseball cap in the right corner on the street. Their car had just had their windows shattered, and I started chatting to him, added him on Telegram, and the next day he messaged me being, hey, I work with a volunteer group. Do you want to come and see what we do? And we went there and met them, and they brought us along in this evacuation. And then I'm going to show you, this is on the podcast as well. So I'm going to show you some of the audiograms that the team made to promote the podcast. It shows, this blending of audio and video that I was very happy I was able to do. Let's see.
Yes, are they bringing her cat? Yep, they're bringing the cat too. That's what the cat food was for. They're going to have to catch that cat now.
Larissa tells me it's been terrifying living under constant shelling. The night the full-scale invasion began, even the cat, whose name is Katya and who usually refuses to sleep in her bed, crawled in next to her. Sergei scoops up the cat. It's gray, fluffy, and grumpy. He plops it into a cardboard box and tapes it up. Don't worry, they've poked holes.
So yeah, that's her story. I was reporting while recording. Arman, the DP, was recording in this for this, and I'm photographing and hosting. For me, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm photographing people, I'm often talking to them and trying to make them feel at ease and just curious, asking them questions. So it kind of really worked out for me. If I could do that again, that'd be great. You know, recording a podcast while photographing. Now this time I'll have a mirrorless that will not, you know, be a very loud shutter and the bane of my editor's ear.
And when you're shooting that, you know, with their pets, you know, I mean, these for the Ukrainians, I mean, we've seen this all along in all these presentations, how much they care about them, and you know, they really are part of their families, right?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things about Ukraine. I'm an animal lover myself, and they, you know, it's kind of just like no nonsense. Like, yes, they are part of our family, and they're coming with us on the train, and everyone just accepts that. Like, no one really blinks twice at a cat or a dog on the train. Actually, on my last train ride, at one point, the train carriage lady attendant like knocked on the door because they like lost a cat on the train and were looking for it. So yeah, there's just animals everywhere. Also in the podcast, we're in Kharkiv at a shelter, and like someone had their like giant guinea pigs. You meet all sorts of animals, which is great. So I'm conscious of time. I'm gonna just quickly go through some of these. These are from an assignment I was on for NPR. So on occasion I'll go on assignments, and you know, for me, it's, as you know, had so much freedom covering Ukraine, and being on assignment is definitely a very different experience. You know, obviously you're working with a journalist, you have a very specific aim. So this story was about the theater troupe from Mariupol who put on a play again in the far west in Uzhgorod. So I was also really grateful to be able to capture, you know, a positive story. I've been covering a lot of evacuations from the front lines. This is, I think, back in June or July from Frontline in Siversk. A lot of volunteer groups go out and actually, you know, either bring aid or take people out if they want to. A lot of people want to stay, so you know, they bring aid instead. And I've, you know, gone on a lot of evacuations in Donbass over the last few months, and it also really just gives you a look at what life is like. This is a bit of sidebar. I've also had the chance, this is a story I've been working on, no one's seen these images, but I'm working on a story about national parks in Ukraine. So I've had the chance to like see the wild natural side of Ukraine in the midst of all this and get to know the country better. This is a lady who delivers groceries to villages that were like abandoned after Chernobyl, and still people live there, so she goes around. This is a lot of the stories I think that I like to do are sort of following people at pivotal moments of their lives. This is following a woman back to Izium right after it was liberated. She got to see her parents for the first time since February. It was a very emotional reunion. And, you know, in this case, again, like she was very adamant that we come with her. You know, she understood that this was important. She wanted this to be documented. She wanted people to see this. And again, I was so grateful to be able to capture not just such an intimate moment, but also just like such happy moments. And I think that's also sort of lacking from the war. This is a lady we met in some of the liberated villages outside of Kupiansk. You know, she came back to her house. It was ransacked by Russian soldiers, and later, you know, Ukrainian soldiers too had stayed there. This is her sort of going back for the first time and assessing the damage. So being able to be there at these key moments that I think are sort of, I'm a very, you know, chronological storyteller, as you can see, and I like being able to document these scenes. I'll sort of, how are we doing for time?
You're fine. Yeah, just you're moving along.
Okay. All right. So we got about 20 to go. This is, you know, a lot of the small things that you get to see, just taking your time to travel around the country. This is just kids at a you know, block post, a fake block post, collecting money for the armed forces. This is near this is on the way to Kramatorsk out east in Donbass. This is a pontoon boat outside of Liman right after it was liberated. So a lot of the stories now, you know, it's about going to towns right after liberation or following evacuations. On my last trip, I sort of focused on evacuations. These are actually all unpublished photos. I'm still working on them. So these are sort of a very rough edit. You're kind of getting a sneak peek of what's going through my head. I was following different volunteer groups as they went to the very front line. This is in Eastern Bakhmut, where right now there's a lot of intense fighting. There's always been intense fighting there, but people are still living there. And, you know, people are leaving and still leaving, you know, even when people have the option, people choose to stay here, they're saying goodbye. You know, he was only leaving because his apartment was shelled itself, and that's sort of what it took for him to leave. You know, cluster rocket munitions just lying everywhere, you know, in apartment buildings. Again, spending so much time, you just, yep, sorry.
No, I just wanted to ask you, like the hardware that you see, the military hardware, anywhere on there can you see, you know, that it's a European tank or rocket launcher or an American thing, a NATO thing? Are there any sort of identifying pieces to those pieces of equipment?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that is very much not my forte. There's a lot of people in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine who are watching the war carefully, who, you know, are war nerds and
Is that a
can
term?
name a model. That's what I call them.
Okay.
War nerds who, you know, can identify, you know, models and years and makes on site or like by sound. And to be honest, that's not what interests me. That's not that's not my forte. It's not my expertise. I'm here to tell human stories, and I let the war nerds do that. But yes, in theory, people can identify them.
Okay.
So like, and yeah, spending so much time in the ground, you get organic moments. Like here, I was with volunteers who ran out of gas, so they like flagged down this artillery truck and asked them for gas, which they happily gave us. They like siphoned out into plastic bottles they found on the side of the road and gave us like 10 liters, which is very generous. This, you know, again, following these volunteers, you just get to meet people who never would in the first place. This is a family living on the, you know, Sievers Bakhmut front line who live with like 3 kids in the dark and we kind of rely on aid and are refusing to leave. This is in Bakhmut. You know, the more time you spend in these places, the more just like moments you get. This is in Siversk, I believe, you know, a family that was living underground and the son had a job, so he had to leave. We're getting at a point in the war, it's interesting. People have left and come back and are leaving again. So it's, you know, you get to a strange point in the war where things are sort of stabilized, where people kind of, you know, they're not just fleeing, they're maybe leaving and then coming back and then, or, you know, this guy, you know, he had left before and was actually like delivering aid, but now he's leaving for a job and he's saying bye to his parents. And again, like I'd always try to capture the emotional moments. So yeah, these are just for my last trip. I still am sort of going through them and figuring out what to do with them. I'm hoping to pitch them as a story. This is evacuation also from Bakhmut. You know, a lot of these are Finnish and American volunteers carrying a man down the stairs under pretty heavy shelling. And you still meet, you know, ladies with dogs in pink jackets and ponytails. It's all quite surreal. So one of the girls they delivered to the evacuation train in Pokrov, and again, you get people going back and forth. So this girl lives in East Bakhmut, or she did, which is on the very, very front lines. I think, you know, where she lives now might even be occupied at this point. And they had actually left during the summer and gone back. And now they're leaving again. So you're getting these kind of complicated stories. This is a dog that just jumped in the evacuation train. I'm gonna sort of this is from Lugansk, for very grim scenes. This is probably as closest to the front line that I got, where things were just hectic and wild, and we still had Russian bodies sort of lying on the street. Still very much at the time contested territory. And that's where evacuators were going. Artillery. And going back to, you know, war nerds, like these soldiers actually like at first were very skeptical about photojournalists who come in all the time and sort of bother them doing their work. But they actually thanked us at the end very profusely because we actually took the time to like talk to them and get to know them and ask them their names and what they liked about their job. So I think, you know, I like to think that's where I come in as a journalist, is really just trying to get to the human personal side of things. You know, a lot of journalists, you know, for good reason, come in and cover the war nerd things, the heavy artillery, the machinery, the economic and geopolitical aspects of the war. But yeah, I think sometimes the human side sort of gets lost. And this is for my last train ride out of Ukraine, when the power cuts were really starting in earnest and things were getting kind of hard for people living in cities. And these didn't turn out great. And these are, but yeah, I think I'll end there. This is sort of my last memory of Ukraine, is sharing a cabin with this man for 22 hours. So there's I always, you know, try to find the light moments and the human moments in throughout this very terrible and tragic conflict. And thank you for letting me share my work. And yeah, thanks so much for listening.
First things, Laurel, make sure you put in the chat room links to your to those videos and to your website so everyone can go and visit them. That's important. You know, there's something about all you know, in all these presentations we've seen how people take care of their animals, and it seems to me, as we see that again, you know, the animals sort of keep everyone civilized. Like there's somebody else to always take care of, and it happens to be the animal, even for the little kids, right? You know, it's probably a beautiful distraction for the parents. Make sure you take care of the cat. You know, you have to be strong. You know, those types of things. It's sort of an interesting therapeutic element to all.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's been a lot of animal stories to come out of Ukraine, and I think, you know, it's easy to dismiss them as less stories, which, you know, they often are. But I think, you know, they play a very big role in for mental health, I think, in Ukraine. You know, it gives a lot of people a sense of purpose. It brings a lot of people company and calm, you know, a lot of elderly people. You know, I've been in Seversk, where there's only 2 old ladies left on their block, and all they have to do is to take care of the stray dogs and cats on their street, and you know, that keeps them going. You meet a lot of old people who are doing that, and I think, you know, it's the mental health toll of this war, especially on the elderly, especially on the people who are left behind on the front lines. I think that's something that hasn't been talked about enough, and I think animals play a big part in helping to keep these people sane and to, you know, give them hope.
Yep. And so, what are your long-term plans now, as far as going?
I like I mentioned, I'm working on a long-term feature-length documentary with my colleague Arman and Andriy, who Arman is on his way there. Andriy's in Kyiv. We are committed to following these 3 people for the duration of the war, however long that is. We're going to keep going in and out as much as we can. I see Wolf here. You know, I think Wolf can relate in that, you know, I think I personally have fallen in love with the country and have really loved getting to know the place and the people and the culture. You know, I have a 95-day streak on Duolingo that I'm very proud of. And, you know, I'm as a freelancer, I think I really want to take advantage of my ability to be able to invest in a story like this as much as I can, which a lot of, you know, staffers, for example, don't have the liberty. You know, you're often cycled in and out, or, you know, some text correspondents, of course, get to live there, but even then they're kind of confined to one area. So I feel very committed to the story and will try to cover as much as I can, as long as I can, really. You know, it's hard as a freelancer, but we'll see.
if anyone has a question, just raise your hand so that we can unmute you. But I see Wolfgang, I think you're unmuted if you wanted to add.
To add to this beautiful presentation?
No, just if you have a question yourself or you have a comment as a friend.
Yeah, I came in a little bit late. I know Laurel from Ukraine. We actually met there and started a great friendship through appreciating such a beautiful country, like she had said. I didn't catch all of the work at the beginning of this. I was like 20 minutes late. My question would be if you had one singular photo that you're able to share with folks from your time there, the one that means the most to you, which one is that?
I think it was the one I took in the car of the couple going back to European. Let me try to pull it up. I think for me, it was such an emotional moment where I think these poor people were so focused on their pain in a way that they
Very
kind of
powerful.
forgot we were there. And I think
This is everything.
thank you. Yeah, it was just so, I think, everyone in that car was so, I think we were all holding back tears. It was so powerful and raw and emotional, and the fact that, we were able to document it and in a way that I hope, wasn't imposing to them or bothering them, and, for in this image, it's a bit, I do want to be transparent in that we did offer them a ride and they are in our vehicle. And I think in Ukraine, it's obviously I wasn't gonna do like make them walk 3 kilometers and like drive slowly next to them while, so it's like in these moments, it's kind of like a no-brainer. And like, of course, like, yes, like please come in our car. And so this is it's a bit of a unusual image in that, I had such a hand in creating the scene in a way. Obviously I'm not like, that wasn't the intention, but it just sort of happened organically and these moments are happening thousands of times over throughout the war. But they're not really moments you get to see. And so I feel very privileged that we got to be there and witness it and document it and share it with other people.
Yeah. And Howard, did you have a question?
I did, but it's more technical than artistic, or maybe it's hard to separate the artistic piece out of the skill that you have in the way that you shoot things. I know that when I shoot street photography, that I prefer to use a zoom lens so that I can be close when I need to be, and I can be far away. And that was one thing I was curious about. And then it seems like the lighting of so many different scenes that you're in would require just amazing agility to be able to adjust for that. So I didn't know if you were setting up your system for auto ISO where the camera was making decisions about how to set the camera to be able to capture the available light. I thought maybe you could comment about lens choices and how you set your gear up if you were so inclined.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks for that. I shoot entirely manual. It is a lot of adjustments, which means a lot of messing up too, to be honest. I think I realized covering the Hong Kong protests a few years back that, I'm actually good at, working under pressure in intense environments where there's a lot of changing factors and, it's very physical. I mean, the war is not Ukraine war, at least what I'm covering isn't quite like that, but I like to attribute it to my 20 plus year long rugby career. I'm an athlete, and so I'm used to, working under very physical, kind of hyper focus, and time slows down. So I kind of am good at that. And then in terms of light, I was very reluctant to go mirrorless, very reluctant, as Wolf also knows. But the Sony Alpha 1, for example, it's like incredible in low light. So I couldn't have shot those images in the train station without that camera for sure. I also like to carry around primes. My colleagues like to make fun of me for being, such a turtle for carrying so much around. But in general, I mean, my workhorse is really just a 24-70. I like, being close to people and working, making sure that, trying to make people feel comfortable around me and not trying to be intrusive and having them be okay with me being around, just snapping away in their faces. But yeah, I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No,
but yeah,
it
really,
does.
90% of those were on a 24-70, to be honest. Yeah, 2.8. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing to me from the light of the view screens from coming off cell phones and computer screens and things like that in people's faces of many of the images to other spaces that you've taken images of where the light is just absolutely perfect. And it's just astonishing to see that given the full range of light situations you found yourself in. So I was curious because it's an art and it's really clear that you're masterful at it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Laurel, like, what do you do to sort of decompress after you come home, of shooting this type of work for a long period of time? What makes you like back to normal?
Good question. I'm not sure I've figured out if I have. Sometimes I'm not quite sure I am okay. I think I'm okay. But
Are there signs
I
for
think
you?
yeah.
No,
Are
there
those what,
signs?
sorry?
Are there signs for you as far as I'm a little too short-tempered or I'm not caring enough? What is it for you?
I think my last trip was sort of the first time when I was like, okay, like I'm ready to leave. I've sort of hit a wall. And of course, like, I'm very privileged in that I have that choice. But I think on my last trip, I was just a bit too close to the front line. I'm glad, I got, none of that was for the documentary. So that's footage that hasn't been seen yet. But, after that, I was just like, okay, like I found my limit, like don't want to be closer than that. The team that I was following, they went back to the same location in Lugansk the next day and got caught in the middle of a tank battle. So I was like, yep, glad I didn't go to that. So I think really knowing your limits and being very conscious of that. I'm also very health conscious, mental health, physical health. So I think I'm very, for me, it's a priority to really take care of myself in general, especially when I'm in the field. It's not always possible, but like, I'm vegetarian. I try to get enough sleep. I don't drink. I still exercise. I can tell you where all the best gyms in every city in Donbass are. So like, I think for me, like just really prioritizing that makes a big difference. And, I think when your life is on the road, you kind of have to make sure your routines are in place, even when on the road, because if you make exceptions for when you're on the road, your life is kind of an exception, right? So I try to not make exceptions when I'm on the road.
Yeah, that sounds like a perfect system. And do you call home
Not
often?
quite, but
Yeah. Do you call home often to make everyone feel calm?
No, I mean, I'm really grateful for friends like Wolf, who kind of just like know what it's like out there and you don't really have to explain, and they don't ask questions like, so what is it like? And you're like, how am I supposed to answer that question? So I think having that community of people who get what you do and why you do and what it's like out there, but you can also laugh with at all the ridiculous things that happen and that you see that are just like so inexplicable or contradictory or just so dark, and you kind of just have to laugh, and having that support system of people who you can just be yourself without. And I think when you go home or around people who don't do this kind of work, they kind of sometimes they like tiptoe around you. I think they think you're some sort of like hardened war journalist who's seen things, and I mean, maybe that's true, but like, I don't want to be tiptoed around. And I think having people who don't tiptoe around you is really important. But I don't really communicate with people home much, actually. I kind of just hang out with the people who are in Ukraine.
That you're there. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody?
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, Laurel, thank you for that incredible show of photographs, really powerful, beautiful photographs. I want to ask the $64,000 question though. How does anybody see this war ending?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Ukraine's gonna back down. I think anyone who spent any time in Ukraine can tell you that Ukrainians are not gonna back down, and they're gonna fight till the end, and they're not gonna negotiate. So, I think any diplomatic or political situation kind of has to take that into account, just the will of the Ukrainian people. I think military aid, Ukraine couldn't keep fighting without military aid. That's pretty essential. But, as it drags on, it's sort of just a war of attrition. It's Russia is going to keep throwing bodies at the front line, and Ukraine, no matter how hard they fight, how bravely they fight, they are going to lose people, and they're going to run out of people. So honestly, I don't know. It's hard to see this ending anytime soon, but something's got to give at some point. Yeah, I wish I could tell you, but a lot of people wish they knew too. Yeah.
I mean, for the first time, you're seeing Ukraine attacking in Russian territory. I don't know if that's gonna prolong things,
For
help
sure.
things.
Yeah.
But they need to.
Yeah, I think
they have every
Yeah.
right to, and Russia's destroying Ukraine and they're not suffering the consequences, except for the soldiers there who are mincemeat.
Yeah. I think, public will internationally in Russia are going to be key. In Russia, it's hard to say how much public will really matters, public opinion really matters. And so I think there's just so many factors. Who knows? I think sorry to interrupt. I think there's one question from Linda. I want to make sure I get.
Yes, hi, thank you. I was wondering if you will be going back.
Yes, I'll be going back in February. Honestly, every time I leave, I'm always sad to leave. I mean, last time I was pretty burnt out in a way. I'm going back pretty much as soon as I can after some commitments in February. I basically go as soon as I can, and then I leave because I have to. I'll leave, I'll probably go in early February, and then I'll probably leave mid-March. So I try to, because it's so hard, well, it's just a hassle to get in and out. So you want to stay for at least a few weeks to make it worthwhile. The shortest trip I did was 2 weeks, and that was pretty rough. But if I could, I probably would just be based there. But it's I have to keep going in and out, for like other gigs, or I am actually doing a master's. I need to finish that this year. But yeah, I try to stay a month to 2 months at a time. Take a break, go back in.
And how do you manage whether you're going freelance or you're going, for a publication? How does that?
Right now the pattern that I'm trying to fall into is like every trip I put out one freelance piece to sort of, I don't know, feel productive. Maybe that's like a productivity trap I fall into, just sort of feel productive. And as a journalist, there's a big part of me that does want to chase the news, but then the rest of the time is sort of dedicating to filming the documentary, especially because they're not always available. Kind of depends on their availability, their schedules, if I can find things to do while I wait around for them. And because a lot of them work or live in Donbass, sort of I'll film with them for a day and then work on another story for a few days and then go back to them. Sometimes it overlaps.
Well, okay. So do you have to watch what you're doing for the documentary, which is for yourself, versus what you have to do for publications, right? I mean, there can't be an overlap because the publication wouldn't want you to have that footage in your documentary, right? So it's like putting on two different things.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, because the documentary is obviously video, and for me, my freelance work is I like to do photos. So that's like a separation by medium, if you will. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions from anybody? Okay, great. Well, you know what? I mean, you Laurel, and like I've told Wolfgang, this platform is yours. if you, when your documentary is done, we would love to show it here. You have new work, we'd love to have you come back. Because we have no way of thanking yourself, Wolfgang, and all the other journalists who've been here presenting work, that you can always come back and show us new work. We need it, we want it, all of that. So we cannot thank you enough for doing this. We really appreciate it. And what I'd like to do is give you the final word for the evening.
Well, yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to share my work. I don't think I've actually done that since I started covering Ukraine. So it's kind of a therapeutic process for me too, to sort of look back and remember all the things that I've seen and all the people I've met and all the places I've been. I think, as photographers, we're always like producing. And it's easy to forget to digest ourselves, and that's really important. So thank you for joining me on a Thursday evening. I really appreciate it. You've been a really kind and attentive audience, so thank you.
Thank you. Tomorrow night we have Ira Lupu, who's also covered the Ukrainian conflict, so he'll be presenting tomorrow night. So anyone that can make it in tomorrow, we'd love to see everyone. And also for the folks who won't be around tomorrow night, we have great holidays, safe holidays. And Laurel, Wolfgang, we thank you so much for coming in and presenting. And we look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow night. So happy holidays.
Thank you.
Happy holidays to you
Thanks,
too, Frank.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Jay. Take
Thanks.
care. Bye.
Amazing. Thank you, Frank.
Thanks, Stefan, for being there. We appreciate it for everybody.
Makes you speechless.
It does. It really does.
I want to say something and then I just.
If you're around tomorrow, you get your 5 minutes.
Okay. I should write down my questions up front.
Yeah, or you can put it in the chat room next time.
It's so brave, and this one was so human. I mean, we have all seen a lot of war photography, but this one was different. It was.
Yeah, it seems like each one touches a particular nerve. Last night was special. 2 weeks ago was special. Like everyone has a little thing that touches somebody and gives you beautiful perspective. Like those animals. I never looked at the animals the way I did. The way just something she said. I don't know what it was, but like how that really keeps you humanized. Because you have to take care of somebody else. And yeah. So
cat picture.
Yeah.
Burns into your. Well, she looks them into the eye like people too.
Yeah. Any pet owner will tell you, right? I mean, they are. So we'll see everyone tomorrow night, and